Hey there YouTube, this is Cam Stark again with EcoBeast Garage. We are actually here at True's house and we got all three of the race cars today. Of course there's Felicia, we got Austin with his black RS, and today, the car that we're actually going to be working on today is Trey's Preface. It's a performance blue, it's got an RS wing here on it. He's actually done a few things since I last saw it. He's got these beautiful wheels. But today we are doing a wheel bearing. So a couple things we have here. I've got my corded impact gun. I've got of course a bearing press kit. You can pick this up. I picked this one up from Harbor Freight. And it really is just a series of plates and cups so that you can get that wheel bearing out. So a couple things that they recommend, at least they being Ford, is that you should not reuse the axle nut. Axle nut, snap ring, hub, and the actual bearing itself all should be just replaced all as one assembly. Through AutoZone, I know it's a pretty reasonable price kit, but there's other parts stores probably that you can find these at. I've also found parts and pieces from Advance Auto, Riley's, probably, you know, all of the major businesses out there. But we'll go ahead and get started. We'll get the car up in the air and we'll take you through. All right, so we got the car up in the air, got the wheel off. Now, this here, the axle nut, is a 32 millimeter. As you can see, he's missing a stud. That's actually why we're doing this replacement, so we can change the whole hub assembly. He'll get a whole brand new set of 5 by 108 lugs. You will have to take the brake calipers off. You don't have to take the whole brake pad assembly or caliper assembly apart. But on the back here, there are two 18 mil bolts. There's one of them, and there's another one down here near the bottom of the knuckle. Once that's off, the rotor will pop off, and then we can start taking this axle nut off. And then it comes down to disassembling the knuckle assembly, and we'll walk you through that once we get to that point. Alright, so we got all the brakes taken apart here. We do have a dust shield that we're still going to take off of the knuckle. But just to run you through, those are 10 mil bolts on those 3 sides. So you have one down here, one up top, and then one there towards the back of the knuckle. Next, what we will also have to do behind the brake dust shield, you'll see that this wire here comes down into the knuckle. That's your ABS wheel speed sensor. Now to unplug it, there's like a little clip that faces the front of the knuckle, and you just give it a little wiggle, and there it is. It just pops right out. But down in there, and I wish the flash would kind of kick on here, but there is a small sensor that you have to take out of the knuckle, and you'll see as we go through the wheel press process that wheel speed sensor actually goes into the knuckle and actually covers over the magnetic strip on the back of the wheel bearing. And so with that in the way, you won't be able to press the bearing out without, of course, you know, causing damage to that part. We're not trying to do that. We're just trying to change wheel bearing and hub. So we're gonna go ahead and start taking apart the dust shield, and then we'll check in with you here in a little bit here once we get to the point of disassembling the knuckle.
Yeah. Axle. And I ended up emailing the company, like, hey, I never got my part, and even though I had it, and so they sent my money back. So now I got free axle, and yeah, I'm gonna get that covered. I'm sorry.
No, you.
I'm gonna get that covered too. Yeah. You know the guy with that wrap? He got his on that.
True, you got the pass-through sockets?
Yeah.
Alright, so what we're doing right now is we're taking the knuckle apart. Now, up at the top there, the strut goes into the knuckle. It's a 15 millimeter long bolt that goes all the way through the clamshell in the back. Down below, I believe it's a 16 millimeter bolt, or 16 millimeter nut with a T55 Torx nut passing through from the other side. And then, of course, on the very far side of the tie rod is connected via a 15 millimeter bolt nut as well. So we're just kind of working on getting those things disassembled. The easiest way is really to get the whole knuckle out of the car, and then the removal process of the hub is somewhat fun and kind of, you know, therapeutic in a way, because you get to beat the hell out of it. But we're gonna get this knuckle out, and then we'll catch up with you guys when we get to that point. Alright guys, so we've got the knuckle pretty much disassembled. Now you might run into this because heat corrosion is a real problem on these cars, is that the tie rod may not want to come out of the knuckle. So in the case of that, of course we do have the nut loosened, but we don't necessarily need it off. We are just rotating on the actual tie rod assembly. This, as long as it doesn't get adjusted, you're not going to mess up your alignment. This is just going to sit like this. Now we set these bricks up underneath the knuckle so that when we actually take the 32 mil, which we used for the axle nut, We can set it here, and now we're gonna have to hammer out the old hub spindle. So each blow, as you can see, we've had a few blows on this thing before. It's going to knock the hub spindle out, and then we can start using that press kit to get the rest of the assembly apart. But as long as you get the strut, the lower control arm out, you can use everything here. Just be careful not to hit your fenders. So.
Give it a couple smacks.
All right. So a little bit of an update, guys. So a lot has happened. We were actually able to get the knuckle out, which we ended up having to do because we had some bricks stood up underneath the well, and it wasn't quite working. But we managed to get the knuckle out. Now, ideally, whenever you take the knuckle out, you are trying to push that hub bearing out, which we got this out, and that's basically the process. Now we set the knuckle on a couple blocks just like so. You want to make sure it's sturdy and rested under two very, very solid areas. The hub spindle will hang down below, but you're going to take that 32mm socket like we had before, set it on the back, and just hammer it, ideally with a big hammer if you can. Once we have that out, of course this broke out part of the bearing along with it, but the bearing is being replaced, so it doesn't really matter. Once you have that out, now we can take out the snap ring. Make sure you do this before you try and push the bearing out, because you're either A, going to break the snap ring, or B, you're just not going to get anything done. And that's what we've ran into before on previous hub bearing switches. But yeah, once the snap ring is out, ideally if you have a replacement one, do it, but we are going to reuse this one, so thankfully there was no major damage or bending on it. It'll slot right back in there. We'll clean up the knuckle too before we put it in. This is the hub bearing press kit being used here though. To get the bearing out, the bearing is going to come out the front side of the knuckle, or outside where it would be. Ideally what's going to happen is Trey's going to have his impact gun on this nut with a 32mm to go ahead and drive this out. Meanwhile, I will sit on the back here with a pipe wrench just to hold it steady so that that thread will then pull that bearing out. You can get a number of these kits. This whole kit has all these different size spacers and plates for different size bearings, and obviously we'll be using a series of different plates to press this in and out the whole assembly. So
Sick.
Yep.
Let's watch this happen.
All right, let's go ahead and hit it.
Ready?
Yep, tighten it. Go. Oh, hold up.
We're gonna flip them.
You ready?
Yeah. Keep going.
Pressing it.
No, just hit it. Stop. All right. Go ahead and hit it again.
This thing's fucking strong. I love this.
It is.
It's moving.
I love
It
this.
is.
Ready?
Yep. More ooga-dooga, we should be good to go.
Okay.
Yep.
Ready?
Yep. There it is. Good.
Oh boy.
All right, so we still recording?
Oh
boy. All right, so we got the whole thing disassembled. Now what I'll have him do is I'm gonna actually have him loosen this. Cool. So inside the cup now, we can take all these plates and washers off. We have what is remaining of the old wheel bearing. Of course, like you saw, the outer race got stuck to the old hub spindle when we took it out. But there it is, the old buddy. There you go, a little souvenir. Don't say I never gave you anything, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Car back.
There we go.
Nice.
All right, so we got the wheel bearing, the old one pressed out. It came out pretty easily. And now we are on the process of putting the new one in. something I just want to point your attention to, depending on which wheel bearing you go with. This is the national bearing from Advance Auto. This one, you will have a magnetic strip on both sides. However, when I did one of mine, it was, actually both of them were Duralast wheel bearings. They only have a magnetic strip on one side. The important part is to make sure that you have a magnetic strip on the inside of the wheel bearing. The reason for this is that your wheel speed sensor uses a magnetic switch read in order to actually read anything off your wheel bearing, and that magnetic strip needs to be on the inside. So thankfully, if you do go through Advance Auto and you get this national wheel bearing, you'll have magnetic strips on both, so it really doesn't matter which way you put it in, but definitely make sure that you do that. Right now, where we're in the process, we're about to put that snap ring back in. Then we can, of course, press in the new hub spindle, and then it'll be finally reassembly time.
Sick.
It's a ST3. I think it's ST3 2013.
All right, guys, so this is very important. Definitely do not make these mistakes when you go to put the wheel bearing in. If you notice, of course, there is a full side of this wheel bearing here that is exposed. Now, what we need to do is the same plate that you use to press the bearing out is what you're going to use flat-sided on the back of the wheel bearing. Do not brace up against the knuckle when you go to press the hub spindle back in. What that will do is it'll actually break your wheel bearing. Ask me how I know. So, like I said, a number 5 plate. Number 5 plate is what we use to actually press the bearing out. If you can see, that just fits inside there, and it fits over top of the entire backside of the wheel bearing. And what that'll do is that'll give a good solid bracing up against the wheel bearing. So when the hub spindle goes in, it's not gonna ever go in past further than the wheel bearing anyways. So you know that you need to brace up against that when you're pressing the spindle back in. So just a little key thing. We're gonna go ahead and hook up the impact and get this thing driven in the rest of the way. We'll follow up with you once we get the hub spindle in. Done.
And then back
Okay.
her off.
Yep. Loosen it. All right. So, folks, that is a pressed-in wheel bearing and hub spindle. Right there, we are now able to go ahead and start attaching the tie rod, lower control arm, the upper strut, and the sway bar. Everything. This car is ready to be put back together. All right.
So excited for 5 lugs again.
Yeah, it's almost like... Alright guys, so just a little bit of an update. Here we have pretty much everything just about slotted back in. We've got, the strut slotted back in up top. Lower ball joint is also down there, not quite tightened yet. And of course we have the tie rod, outer tie rod into the knuckle. Wheel speed sensor has also been reinstalled. And we're just in the process of basically just tightening, torquing everything down. Sway bar link, of course, is already mounted up there as well. So everything's kind of going in smoothly now at this point. The real hard part, and you guys will know this as you go to do this work, is just getting that hub spindle pressed out and back in. All the tools that we use there, like I said, they're pretty straightforward to find. Definitely be careful using impact guns. We noticed that on the bearing press tool, and I can show you guys, of course, a little bit, that the thread on the bolt got a little bit torqued out, but we were able to kind of correct it and it still works. So just be careful whenever you're using impact tools. You know, things obviously are using a heavy amount of pounds of force, and of course things can break or get damaged in the process. But we'll kind of keep up with you. We still have those 3 10mm bolts to get the dust shield back on. Of course the rotor will then go on, caliper, and of course, last but not least, the wheel. Alright, so we got the wheel back on. Everything is all tightened up. We're ready to put this car back on the ground. Remember to like and subscribe, of course, guys. If you have questions, definitely leave them in the comments. Very happy to get this thing all squared away, and we finally have done this now 4 times. Twice on my car, and now twice for a couple other people's cars. So, definitely make sure to subscribe to EcoBeast Garage. We will see you soon.